What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. This once again has been brought to us courtesy of Screaming Toilet. Again, fun site full of reviews, articles, all sorts of cool pop culture stuff, podcasts. Definitely check it out. It's a fun time. So today I'm reviewing Mortuary's new album, The Autophagous Rain. This came out the 8th of November on Xenocorp Records. This band is from France. They've been around since 1989, but they didn't put out their first full length until 1996. And these guys are pretty much a death metal, thrash metal hybrid. Pretty much fits right in between the two. It's an awesome blend of the sound, honestly. This is their 6th full length, and we're going to get into it. So right away it opens up with Delete Replace. First thing I thought of when I heard this was Dew Scented. That's always a band I thought that really kind of balanced that whole death metal and thrash metal vibe. This song absolutely just explodes. It's under 2 minutes. It is fast, it is furious, the drums are blasting full force. Solid way to open an album. Now the overall sound of the album in terms of production, very modern, very digital, not very much grip, but it's still very well done. I think the drums sound exceptionally good on this, and the guitars have a nice thrashy tone, surprisingly. It doesn't have a very deep death metal tone, but everything sounds really good and well mixed. It's just if you're looking for a little bit grittier production, might not be this release. So as soon as this song ends, it pretty much goes immediately into the next track, The Sapiens Order, which I believe was their lead-off single on this. And once again, you're greeted to fast, thrashy death metal. And it's really interesting when it comes down to this blend. The guitars are very much thrash metal guitars. It has those chuggy, palm-muted riffs that you expect in thrash. Very thrashy riffs. Like, they sound pretty much straightforward, like Slayer, Exodus, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Drums are very much death metal. They are flying at full speed at almost all times, switching between thrashy gallops and straight up blast beats. Honestly, I think the drummer is the most death metal part of this band. Now, when you get down to the vocals actually have almost kind of a hardcore bite to them. His register is pretty much kind of a mid-range kind of growl / shout, and then occasionally he gets down a little bit deeper in there too. So comparatively, I'd say he's like a mix of Marco from The Haunted when he's doing his straightforward growl, and then when he gets down deeper, it's almost kind of like LG from Entombed and Entombed AD. Kind of just sounds gritty and dirty, which I like. Now, throughout the album, like another band I could compare this to would be Hatesphere, which we're listening to right now, because there are some melodic death metal riffs that pop up on tracks on here too. So you hear them in Sapiens Order, you hear them later on in a track called Monuments, which I'll get into later because I thought that was a really good one. And it's an interesting mix in terms of how much actually comes into their sound in terms of pulling influences from all over and making it work as like just a solid overall sound. And what I really liked in here was A Curse in Disguise. This one reminded me a lot of Protector, which is a really good death thrash band as well. Really cool punctuated riffs on here. I really dug the overall feel of this song and most of the songs there because they are just explosive and energetic. But this one actually brought on some groovier moments which hadn't popped up yet, and even threw in some breakdowns which are nice to break up the pace of the album too, because this album again is flying at almost all times. Now, the next track after that I thought was a standout because I thought it was a little bit different. Dominate Modus Operandi. This one actually seemed to favor death metal a little bit more than thrash metal. It wasn't necessarily the balance of the two. I'd say it was like 70-30 death metal. The opening riff has a fiercely death metal sound, and while there are thrashy elements, they seem like they're pushed back just a little bit in favor of just going for a more straightforward death metal sound on this song. Now, leads are used kind of sparingly. Generally, they're very short and just show it for a second. A couple of shreddy leads, and then they're kind of just out of there. This one actually threw in some interesting leads, but during the lead section, there was a part that just kind of popped up out of nowhere, didn't repeat, and it kind of just derailed the whole lead for me a little bit, and it just felt like them just trying to squeeze in too much. Kind of took away from an all-in-all really good song, and it kind of stood out as a glaring moment, unfortunately, for me. Disposable actually brings in some cool grindcore elements, and definitely reminded me of Napalm Death, and even more death grind bands like their fellow countrymen Benighted. Now, this one also had a cool solo that was seemingly kind of derailed by just a moment that just comes in and kind of throws it off for a bit. Again, it didn't repeat, it was just there. So again, another case of them trying to squeeze in a little bit too much. Most of the songs in here are about 3-minute, 4-minute barn burners, keeping a furious pace. But when you get later on the album, you have 2 tracks that are over 7 minutes. And I was really curious as I was going through this album to get to those tracks, because I just wanted to see how they approached writing longer songs in terms of their style being so abrupt and in your face and condensed in shorter songs. Now before that song you get Recycled, which is another cool, almost punk death metal song. I really love the energy on it. This one just sounded like them having fun. It had a good punky feel to it. It was in your face and almost kind of just sounded happy. It just had a really cool, fun feel to it. I just had to bring it up before getting into the next track, which is one of the big 7-minute ones. Memorial in Vivo, the first of these 7-minute tracks. This one opens up with a really cool piano sonnet and then abruptly shifts into pretty much what they do. Straight up thrashy death metal. And I couldn't help but to think, why was that piano part even in there? Like, it really didn't lead into the explosion of the song very well. It just seemed like it was tacked on the beginning. Now, there's some really cool groove metal sections in this song, which I thought were cool, like almost kind of reminiscent of Lamb of God, and they kind of squeeze in some breakdowns that even reminded me of Killswitch Engage. Very catchy, very riff-oriented, and I just dug the overall sound on this. But I couldn't help but to think this just felt like a longer version of the shorter songs. It really didn't have a lot of the big dynamics you expect in a longer song. Now the song fades out into that piano part that opened it up, but again, I really didn't think it was necessary, because that piano part in the beginning really didn't establish that big intro to the point where they needed like a long outro to it. So it just, again, felt like it was kind of tacked on there. Now the other 7-minute track, Monuments, I think they actually really stepped up on this one. I thought this song was very well paced and very well written. Now it opens up with machine gun samples and then moves into this kind of cool tapping in a riff. It actually really reminded me a lot of Psychroptic in terms of the interesting guitar work that their guitarist likes to do. There's a cool section in here that reminded me a lot of Melodic Death, which I brought up before, and this really had like kind of a classic At the Gates feel to it that I really dug. Now before the solo comes in, there's an interesting little French spoken word, and I think that kind of broke up the moment really well before going into the solo, which I thought was pretty good on this one. But again, I think the solo ended a little too quickly, and I think it could have built up. Considering this is a longer song, why not just make this absolutely grand? Now it comes back to that tapping part that opened it up and actually adds some kind of Middle Eastern flair to it, which I love hearing that music. Those are such unique, distinct tones, and they always really sink their hooks in me. I just love that sort of thing. Now, an interesting little thing they did was when they closed it, they brought in that machine gun sample, but they synced it up to the chugging of the guitars, which I thought was really cool. As the guitars slowly fade out, you hear the machine gun sample synced up right to it. So props on that one. That was pretty fucking clever. I like that. Now that was the closing track, but they also threw on 3 re-recorded demos from their earlier work, which I really haven't heard, but the re-recorded songs sound really good, and honestly, it makes me want to look into more of their stuff. I have to say the tone of the earlier songs definitely felt more thrash metal than death metal. Like, these were very more along the lines of like Sodom and Creator in terms of that heavy German thrash. Maybe some elements of death metal, but I think at this point I'd say they were more of a thrash metal band than a death metal band. So overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. This was a really fun listen. Wasn't without its missteps, but overall, I really enjoyed the overall sound of this album. It's produced very well. The energy is nonstop. If you love fast-paced music that is relentless, we'll call it that, definitely check this band out. I need to check out some of their earlier releases because I'm definitely interested now. It's good finding bands that balance death metal and thrash metal so well, and I think this band does it quite brilliantly. So, if you like the review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do shit like this all the time. Catch you guys later.